All right, everyone, archived link in the description to an interesting article. It's from CNN of all places, so keep this in mind. When CNN is proclaiming the likelihood of Trump's re-election, when they're blackpilling the Democrats, and they're joining like The Guardian and all of these other groups, increasingly, it's really, since impeachment began being more than a murmuring, since the unofficial inquiry that Pelosi never wanted to make official, because they're speeding through it right now for a reason, and everyone sort of understands. The Democrats are totally fucked up on impeachment. Since then, you've gotten more and more lamestream corporate legacy networks admitting to what people like myself have been saying for the last several years, which is that Trump is probably going to be a two-termer. Now, they're not willing to admit that this is for a plethora of reasons. They're trying to boil it down to one very simplistic reason, and historically it's not wrong. The point does stand. It's the economy, stupid. You've got an incumbent president reigning over a strong economy. He is likely to be reelected. This is the way that it has typically worked. You look at all of the recent presidents. Bush, he's overseeing an increasingly, at that point, unpopular war. Has all sorts of domestic scandals going on. He still gets reelected, in fact, by a larger margin than in 2000. Why? Why does he get reelected? Well, because of the economy. You look back, though, at like someone like Jimmy Carter, he gets kicked aside. Now, Jimmy Carter, for all of his maybe diplomatic weaknesses, altogether was not a shitty president. In many ways was okay. He gets very, very little credit. He's consistently ranked a lot lower than he should be. That being said, though, the economy was fucked because of the oil shocks, among other things at the time, and so he gets kicked aside. Reagan. There were plenty of scandals and problems enveloping Reagan by the time he was running against Mondale, but other than the sly jabs that he got in constantly, which got under the dude's skin, really it was about the economy. Clinton, reelected due to economic considerations. Obama was reelected despite the fact that he was not particularly popular. The economy had begun to improve enough so that he was reelected. Trump's economy soaring. I expect him to coast to reelection if this continues. There's a reason why Maher and other Democrats have been hedging their bets on two things. Either remove him from office or an economic downturn. Those are the only ways that he actually gets kicked out. I don't believe a downturn is coming, certainly not in the next year. And the odds of him being removed from office are extremely low. Therefore, I believe it is likely Trump gets reelected. That's what it boils down to. Look at the economic markers. You got 3.5% unemployment. That is low. I understand part of that is labor force participation is also low at the moment. The public doesn't have the wherewithal to give a shit. All they see is the 3.5 unemployment number. They're looking at Obama saying, whoa, 7% unemployment's the new normal. Growth of the economy, GDP growth, it has consistently been above the mark under Trump. It has consistently been above the necessary level to break even with the funny money being printed by the Fed on a day-to-day basis. This is good. It's better than the alternative, which is that it's not keeping pace or that it's shrinking, which it has done in the past. Every single, the Dow Jones. I understand the Dow Jones doesn't necessarily trickle down fully to Main Street, but it is better for the stock market to be rising than for it to be collapsing. So when you look at these economic numbers, keep in mind, administrations since the Bush era have used sets of numbers for wages, unemployment, GDP growth, and so forth that have been fudged up in order to make them look more cheerful. That being said, regardless of what numeric system you're using, we are clearly moving in the right direction. Unemployment is lower, and it is falling. That is the right direction for it to be going in. Wage growth is sustained growth above 3% now. That's good. The alternative would be bad for the American worker. Wage growth is up. Everything. Taxes are down for the working and middle class. Now, this is also, it's hilarious. I spar with people all the time that are still living under the delusion that Trump raised taxes on the middle class. This is flat out, clearly, objectively, completely wrong in every possible way. If you are in the working through upper middle class, anywhere in that range, you saved money under Trump, unless you were writing off work expenses for travel and things of that nature, like you're a freelance trucker or something. Those individuals lost some deductions. Everybody else saved money unless they were filthy rich or paying nothing in the first place. Everybody else got a tax cut. That's most of the US population and the vast majority of the productive population. So there are still 50% of Americans who don't believe that. That's because of a successful propaganda campaign by the legacy media in coordination with their Democratic allies. But it's still a lie. Here's the thing. I can look through those numbers, and I can pick them apart, and I can say, well, 3.5% unemployment sounds good on paper until you count the labor force participation rate being low. Absolutely. Wage growth is up, but there are certain groups that aren't affected. Absolutely. The Dow Jones is at record highs, but it's not trickling down fully to Main Street. Absolutely. The average voter does not understand much about politics. The average voter is not an informed voter. They're just seeing the raw numbers. So when they see those numbers, when they see, hey, we added, an extra 100,000 jobs in this quarter, and wages grew steadily, and unemployment ticked down to a 50-year low, that's all they see. It's a good economy. Now, the legacy media has refused to report on these things. Most of the time, by the way, have you noticed? For the most part, if you pay attention to any of the corporate networks, you don't even get an update anymore about these things. It's sort of like towards, after the first couple years of the Iraq War, most networks no longer gave you like the death totals or told you what was happening in Fallujah or something like that. They didn't want to report on it because they wanted to keep getting those cushy interviews with W and all of his people. There's a reason for that. Until Katrina, then they didn't give a shit anymore. Then they told you how bad things really were. The legacy media is being very, very cutthroat in its reporting with regards to economic numbers, something they never did in the last two administrations. Only at the bitter end of the Bush administration, all hell broke loose for a few months. Then, obviously, he was a lame duck anyway, so he leaves office. Obama never got held to this scrutiny. These people gobbled his shit up. They never scrutinized him over his claim that 7% unemployment was the new norm. Wage growth would never be beyond 2%. We need to rest on our laurels as a nation, bow our heads solemnly, and gracefully retire into the background of history, thinking of when we were a great superpower. We just need to be one of a league of nations now. This was basically the way people were thinking. This is clearly wrong. This is not going to be the future. The future is American. This is the American century. I've been saying that consistently for some time. People think, well, the 20th century was the American century. No, the American century just began. Dude, it wasn't until the middle of the fucking 20th century that the U.S. was truly a great power. It was a power by the early 1900s, but it was only one of a number of players and never a colonial nation. There were all sorts of, the British Empire was considerably more vast, had considerably more manpower and resources. The Russian Empire at its peak gobbled up practically a whole continent. You gotta understand that. The U.S. emerges from the flames of World War II as the guarantor of all trade and travel in the whole fucking Western Hemisphere. It's the American century, especially with the internet now. We're just barely, this is basically like the dawn of flight or something like that. This is more substantial. The changes we are going through right now in technology and in the economy of the world and the way in which the world works is more substantial than the dawn of flight with the Wright brothers or anything like that. It's more substantial than the dawn of television or radio or any of these other advents by far, by orders of magnitude. Or nuclear power. The closest approximation is the rise of atomic energy. That's really the closest approximation to the technology we're now developing. Obviously, the internet transcends the atomic bomb, which is why governments are single-mindedly focused on censoring people. They also don't want populists like Trump to be in power because it makes it easier for them to shill and take more of people's money and rights away. Anyway, because the economy is going well, Trump will probably be reelected. The impeachment fiasco is going to die down fairly quickly. I'm thinking the Senate may rush it through. There's a reason when Trump came out, can I just put this in here? I have a feeling the other day when Trump said, well, hurry up and impeach then if you're going to go that route. It's because he knows that it's a foregone conclusion that the House is rushing it. They're rushing it because they expect to fail. What Pelosi's hoping to do is hold the vote as quickly as possible before Democrats in the House can organize to stop her. Because you've already got at least 3 Democrats in the House that have signaled they may vote no. And that's real fucking dangerous because the more Democrats that get into their heads, maybe this isn't a good idea, the worse. Pelosi wants to push it through. She'd like to hold the vote on Monday. She'd like to hold the vote now. She can't do that, though. I hope that some House Dems bog her down in proceedings as much as possible. Give other Democrats time to consider whether they want to commit electoral suicide. The Democrats will get wiped out in 2020 if you go forward with an impeachment vote and fail anyway. It's very likely. It's getting day by day. Each day that passes before they hold the vote, it gets more likely that they don't even get to impeach him. Oh my God! Can you imagine AOC's reaction? Yeah, she definitely have to be riding the vibrator that night. That's about all. Peace out.